Here's a psychology fact you're not ready for. If you hate small talk, your brain might actually be wired for depth, not dysfunction. If you're the person who goes silent when the conversation turns to the weather, celebrity gossip, or so what do you do, this harsh psychology truth might sting a little. Because society will tell you that you're awkward, reserved, bad at networking. But psychology tells a very different story. And once you understand it, you'll never feel guilty for hating surface-level conversations again. Let's start with the conflict. We live in a world built on social lubrication. Small talk is the oil in the machine. It keeps interaction smooth, it fills silence, it makes strangers feel safe. But for some people, small talk doesn't feel safe. It feels pointless, draining, even fake. Psychologists call this depth orientation bias, a preference for meaningful, cognitively stimulating exchange over socially ritualized interaction. And once you see it, you'll realize something uncomfortable. Your frustration with small talk isn't about arrogance, it's about misalignment. But here's where it gets even worse. Most people who hate small talk don't just dislike it, they feel almost irritated by it. And that irritation, that's not random. Here's the truth bomb. Small talk activates a social performance mode in your brain, and if you're someone who values authenticity over approval, that mode feels exhausting. When you engage in small talk, your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for self-monitoring, goes into overdrive. You're filtering, polishing, editing. You're choosing safe responses instead of honest ones. For some brains, that's fine. It's automatic. For others, it feels like acting, and your nervous system doesn't like acting. But here's the part nobody wants to admit. A lot of people who hate small talk are actually highly perceptive. They notice micro-expressions, tone shifts, energy mismatches. Their amygdala, the brain's emotional radar, is more sensitive. So when someone says, "I'm good, just busy," they don't just hear the words, they feel the dissonance. Small talk becomes mentally noisy. It's like trying to enjoy music when you can hear every instrument slightly off key. Now let's break this down. This happens because your brain is wired for dopamine through meaning, not dopamine through novelty. Some people get a reward spike from rapid social exchange, quick laughs, light banter, constant stimulation. But people who hate small talk often score high in the personality trait called openness to experience. That means they crave ideas, depth, complexity. Their dopamine system responds more strongly to insight than interaction. So when a conversation stays shallow, their brain doesn't get rewarded. No dopamine hit, no cognitive engagement, just social maintenance. And maintenance feels like work. But here's the wake-up slap. If you think hating small talk makes you superior, you've missed the point. Depth without warmth is isolation. And here's the truth you've been avoiding. Small talk isn't meaningless, it's a gateway. Psychologically, it functions as a social safety test. Humans evolved in tribes. You didn't walk up to someone and immediately ask about their childhood trauma or philosophy of death. You started light. Weather, food, shared environment. Small talk allowed two strangers' nervous systems to calibrate. It lowered cortisol. It increased oxytocin slowly. It signaled, "I am safe." In tribal terms, skipping small talk would have been risky. Depth was earned. So why do some modern brains resist it? Because their identity is anchored internally. People who thrive on small talk often rely more on external validation. They feel energized by approval, laughter, and visible connection. But people who hate small talk often derive self-esteem internally. They don't need constant social feedback to feel stable. So surface-level bonding doesn't give them the same emotional payoff. They would rather have one deep conversation than 10 pleasant exchanges. But here's the twist. Avoiding small talk completely can shrink your world. And this next part explains why some of your relationships never moved forward. Small talk is not the enemy, avoidance is. When you reject small talk outright, what you're really saying is, if it's not deep immediately, it's not worth my energy. But depth requires trust, and trust requires time. Small talk is the bridge. Let's go deeper into the psychology. There's something called cognitive load theory. People who process information deeply experience higher cognitive load during superficial exchanges because they instinctively search for layers that aren't there. Their brain keeps scanning for depth. When it doesn't find it, it feels unsatisfied. It's like reading the first page of a book over and over without ever reaching chapter 2. Frustrating. Now let's talk neurochemistry. During shallow conversation, cortisol can rise slightly in people who dislike it because they feel socially evaluated. But during meaningful conversation, oxytocin rises. Oxytocin builds bonding and trust. That's why when you finally find someone who talks about purpose, fears, ideas, philosophy, you feel alive. Your brain lights up, your posture changes, you lean in. It's not that you hate talking without substance. But here's another uncomfortable layer. Some people hate small talk because it removes control. Texting, you can edit. Deep one-on-one talk, you can steer. But small talk in groups is unpredictable, fast, chaotic. And if you value precision in language, unpredictability feels threatening. Your brain chooses efficiency. It wants meaningful signal, not social noise. However, if that hit you, good. It means you needed it. Because here's the growth edge. Small talk is not about content, it's about calibration. It's the psychological handshake before the intellectual embrace.
When you reframe it as a ritual rather than a waste, everything changes. Instead of asking, why are we talking about this? Ask, what is this interaction building? It's building familiarity, reducing threat, testing alignment. Now let's connect this to identity. People who hate small talk often pride themselves on authenticity. They don't want to perform. They don't want to pretend interest. But authenticity doesn't mean intensity. You can be real without being deep immediately. Sometimes authenticity is simply presence, listening without judging the topic, responding without needing it to be profound. Here's the mental trick that actually works. Treat small talk like reconnaissance, not performance, not punishment, data gathering. Observe tone, notice values, watch how someone treats others. Within 5 minutes of small talk, you can detect intelligence, empathy, insecurity, arrogance. It's not shallow, it's strategic. And when you see it that way, your brain relaxes, cortisol drops, curiosity replaces irritation. Let's bring this home. If you hate small talk, it doesn't mean you're socially broken. It likely means you crave depth. You process information intensely. You value authenticity. You're internally anchored. Those are strengths. But strengths without flexibility become walls. The goal isn't to love small talk. The goal is to master it. Use it as a tool. Move through it efficiently. Guide it gently toward meaning. Because here's the final truth. The people who build the strongest networks aren't the deepest thinkers or the loudest talkers. They're the ones who can navigate both worlds, surface and depth, lightness and intensity. Small talk opens the door. Depth keeps it open. So if you've always felt annoyed at surface conversation, understand this. Your brain isn't defective, it's depth-oriented. But growth means learning to swim in shallow water long enough to find the deep end. And if this felt like it was written about you, good. Now you know why. Drop a comment if small talk drains you, or if you've learned to use it to your advantage. Let's talk about it. Ironically, we might have to start with something small.